In this video, I want to show you 13 common symptoms that you're not using good riding technique while trail riding. Don't be discouraged though, because if you have any of these symptoms, that means it can be fixed to get rid of your problem. Starting with problem 13 is stalling. Now, if you're a beginner just trying to figure out how to use the clutch, this is a common problem. But when you're trail riding, a common stalling problem is when you come to a tight or sharp corner. So if you're stalling at least a couple of times when you're out on a trail ride, when you're on tight corners, this is a common sign that you don't have good riding technique. Stalling is really frustrating because you're constantly having to restart your bike, and it can also be easy to tip over because you lose all your momentum, and if you're in a tight corner, it makes it easy to fall over and maybe even get stuck under the bike. Which leads me to number 12. If you're afraid to ride a tall dirt bike, especially if you're a short guy like me or girl, I'm 5'6" with about a 27-inch inseam, which makes it very challenging to ride a full-size bike because it's hard to touch the ground. So if you're afraid of or you're falling over almost half the time when you're coming to a stop, that's a really good sign that you don't have or aren't using good riding technique. This can make it not only frustrating but intimidating because you're afraid of the bike falling over on top of you and possibly getting stuck, or if the bike is really heavy, it's hard to lift up. Now, number 11 symptom is it's uncomfortable to stand on the pegs while riding and using the controls. So either your arms or your knees might feel cramped or uncomfortable, and this is really common if you're over 6 feet tall, and if you feel cramped or it's hard to use the throttle, the brake, the clutch, whether you're standing or sitting, this is a good sign that you're not using good riding technique. And how do I know this? Even though I'm short, I'm used to riding bikes that are way too small for me, and if I'm using proper body position, proper technique, I can still ride the bike comfortably without feeling cramped while using less energy and having more control. Now, symptom number 10 is you're afraid of whiskey throttle. You never really know when the bike is going to wheelie or accelerate more than you expect it to. So a whiskey throttle is when you give it a little bit too much gas and it keeps accelerating and the bike either wheelies out from under you or you fly with it. Maybe you hit a tree or another obstacle or fly off the trail. This is very scary because you feel like you don't have control over the bike. And this is a really good sign that you aren't using good riding technique. Even if you have too powerful of a bike, which I don't recommend if you're just starting out. It definitely makes it harder to control the throttle, but if you're using proper riding technique, you will be able to manage and properly control the throttle so that you don't whiskey throttle and crash. And if you find that it's even harder to manage or control the throttle while standing, that's another big sign that you aren't using proper riding technique. Symptom number 9 is when your front tire is sliding out on flat corners. So maybe it's hard packed ground or gravel and you're turning and the front wheel wants to wash out or slide out away from you. This is a really common problem, especially if you're used to riding on the street where you have basically 100% traction. So where dirt biking, you never really have 100% traction. So obviously you're going to have to slow down when you're turning on a flat corner. But if you have to slow way down to feel comfortable, so if you're riding with a group of friends that you're around the same skill level, but you are slowing down a lot more than they are on flat turns because you feel like your tires are going to wash out, well, that is a good sign that you aren't using good riding technique. Symptom number 8 is you're afraid of handling a heavy dirt bike. So if you're like me, again, 145 pounds, and if you're riding a trail bike that's 250 to 270 pounds, which is over 100 pounds more than me, sometimes almost twice as much as me, that can be very nerve-wracking as well as exhausting, especially when you think that you need to control the whole weight of the bike. That is a good sign that you're not using good technique. And if you're a trail rider that wants to have more confidence, you can grab my Master Your Confidence Trail Riding Handbook at motocrosshideout.com/confidence or the link in the description below. Symptom number 7 is when your hands and wrists get fatigued within 10 minutes of riding. This is similar to the previous one, but when It's hard to hang on to the handlebars. It's hard to precisely control the throttle, pull in the clutch lever or the brake lever. That's a good sign that you're getting fatigued and you're not using proper riding technique if it happens within the first 10 minutes of riding. And why is that? Well, the common mistake is that you're reacting to what the bike is doing. So if you give it gas, and it pushes you back, and then you have to pull yourself back up with the bars, you're reacting to what the bike does, and this is not good technique. Symptom number 6 is you're afraid to use the front brake because it might lock up and you'll wash out, or if you give it too much front brake, you're going to fly over the bars, which is totally understandable. That can be very scary, especially if it's happened to you already. So a lot of people, they either use the front brake very little or not at all. So they only use the engine braking or the rear brake to slow down, which is not good technique, because if you're only using the rear brake to slow down, you're not going to be able to stop efficiently. And this is a major safety hazard, because if you can't stop as fast when you're out trail riding, maybe you're coming up on a corner that you have too much momentum, you're carrying into the corner, and you realize, oh shoot, I need to slow down fast, but you only use the rear brake, you might not stop in time and you might fly off the course or potentially hit a tree. So if you're using the front brake, which is where 80 to 90% of your braking power is, you'll be able to stop faster and prevent crashing. Symptom number 5 is you're struggling in deep, soft sand. So if you're riding in an area that has sandy trails, this makes it feel like the front end has a mind of its own, because you're trying to steer and the front wheel just kind of goes where it wants to, and it just makes it more exhausting. Or you might even knife the front edge where the front wheel just digs right in and throws you into the ground. So what do? Well, most people, they either try and sit towards the rear of the bike, or they try and go faster to try and stay on top of the sand, or maybe even both of these at the same time. But this is a really good sign that you're not using proper riding technique, because if you're putting too much weight on the rear, this makes the front end too light, and this is what gives you that wishy-washy feeling of the front wheel wanting to go wherever it goes. Symptom number 4 is you're afraid of riding tight trails, especially ones with a lot of trees. You start to tense up and you slow way down because you're afraid of hitting these trees. And that's totally understandable, because if you don't have bark busters, aluminum hand guards, all it takes is just slowly hitting a tree with your hand, and that thing hurts for days. So you just start to tense up and death grip the bars, you're squeezing them really tight, and this causes you to get exhausted very quickly, and you're probably looking just a few feet in front of you, just past your fender. Well, that's a really good sign that you're not using good riding technique, because if you're tensing up and squeezing the bars, you won't be able to relax and efficiently use your body. And if you're only looking just past your fender, you're not going to be able to anticipate or see what's coming up on the trail. So maybe there's another tight turn, or maybe there's another tree, and if you're only looking at the ground in front of you, you're more likely to crash into what you don't want to hit. Number 3 symptom is you struggle on tight turns. When you come to a tight or sharp corner that you have to slow way down for, it's hard to stay balanced, so you end up often tipping over because you don't have very good balance at low speeds, or maybe you don't have good clutch and throttle control, so you stall it, and this causes you to fall over, and this can cause you to get stuck under your bike, or it's just super frustrating because you have to constantly pick up your bike, restart the engine, and this makes you really exhausted. So a half an hour trail ride could feel like 5 hours to you when your friends aren't falling and they're wondering why you're so tired. Well, you guessed it, you're not using good riding technique. But the good news is it can be fixed. Number 2 symptom is you're scared of riding down steep hills. If you come up to a section on the trail where there's a steep hill, you might slow way down to a crawl speed because you don't feel like you can control your speed going down the hill. Because if you go too fast, you might fly over the bars, or you might crash once you get to the bottom, which again is totally understandable. And the smart thing to do, if you don't know what to do, is to slow way down, because if you do fall over, it's not going to hurt as much. But this means that you're not using good riding technique. And if you're just slowing down on every downhill, how do you expect to become a more confident rider if you're not changing anything? Symptom number 1 is you struggle to stand while turning. When you're trying to turn, it's hard to manage the throttle and use the brake and the clutch and shift gears. It just feels really awkward. Well, that's a good sign that you're not using good riding technique, because if you were and you were using the proper body position, it would be easy to use the throttle. Your arm wouldn't feel awkward and you'd be able to shift gears and everything would be one fluid, smooth motion rather than being really jerky and awkward, even if you're really tall or really short. Now, some of it may have to do with the controls, how they're set up on your bike, but most likely this can be corrected with proper riding technique. And if you like this video and want to build your confidence faster, then you should check out my video here on why trail riders must learn positive riding habits. So out of these 13 symptoms, which one resonates with you the most? Let me know in the comments below.